A doctor is that very person you should trust if something goes wrong with your body. But after watching this video, you will probably think twice before seeking help from anyone. The stories of real killer doctors will surely not leave you indifferent. Enjoy watching. The reasons for the deviant behavior of medical specialists can be quite diverse, from simple negligence to deep personal experiences and life failures. There are also cases known where doctors simply wanted to feel important and needed and thus engaged in terrible actions. The biography of Richard Angelo, living in late 20th century America in the state of New York, is particularly interesting. He first started working at a hospital when he was 26 years old, and since then felt an uncontrollable desire to be recognized as a hero. Richard's first job as a certified male nurse was in the burn unit of the Nassau County Medical Center at East Meadow. He stayed there for a year, then got a position at the Brunswick Hospital in Amityville, Long Island. Later, he left that position to move to Florida with his parents, but returned to Long Island 3 months later and started working at the Good Samaritan Hospital. It was there that his hidden desires were revealed to the world. Richard quickly established himself as a highly qualified and well-trained specialist, in many ways thanks to his activities. Angelo came up with a plan. He would administer heavy narcotics to patients in the hospital and bring them to a state close to death, often to paralysis. And then he would demonstrate his abilities by helping to save all the victims, impressing colleagues and patients with his expertise. However, not all patients managed to receive life-saving injections. He claimed the lives of 10 people, while 25 miraculously survived. Angelo first attracted attention in 1987. A senior citizen who received a narcotic injection had another nurse assigned to him. She found traces of heavy drugs in the patient's tests that were not prescribed to him. Angelo was arrested as law enforcement had no doubts that he was responsible for what happened. In court, Richard Angelo claimed that he administered lethal doses of a dangerous drug to patients with the sole purpose of saving them from certain death, wanting everyone around to consider him a hero. Currently, he is serving a life sentence in an American prison. A story based on similar motives but entirely different in execution occurred in another part of America in the late 20th century. The death shift is what they called the time from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the Berk County Hospital. Babies died particularly frequently during this period for unknown reasons. Something terrible happened to them. Some of them stopped breathing, others convulsed, and for some, their hearts suddenly stopped. No one suspected that all of this was related to the actions of one person. Jenny Jones was a nurse who killed newborns. Born in 1950, the girl didn't know maternal love. She was an orphan, but she was adopted by good people. She became a beautician and then a licensed nurse. After school, she married a guy she had been dating for a long time and had a child. Overall, her life was going fairly well. The woman got a job at the Berk County Hospital. Initially, no one suspected anything unusual about the increased infant mortality during Jenny's shifts. However, later, the hospital administration initiated an internal investigation, and one of Jenny's colleagues witnessed her administering lethal injections to newborns. The chief doctor's reaction was strange. He simply fired both women, not wanting to attract public attention to the incident. Jenny virtually escaped unscathed and without reputation losses. She quickly found a new job at the Kerrville Children's Hospital. Here, the story repeated itself. A serious investigation only began after the death of a 15-month-old girl. Chelsea McClellan's parents brought her to the hospital for routine vaccinations. However, after the first shot, something immediately went wrong. The baby had a seizure and her heart stopped. During the investigation, it was discovered that the woman was stealing succinylcholine, a drug that causes temporary muscle paralysis, from the supply room and administering it to the children. Jenny was arrested. She was only convicted of 2 murders, as the rest could not be proven. According to investigators, she was responsible for the deaths of at least 60 infants. During interrogations, Jenny admitted to administering dangerous injections to children in order to resuscitate them and received praise from colleagues and parents. A sentence of 99 years in prison was handed down by the Texas court. Unfortunately, there are stories of cases where doctors violated the main principle of the Hippocratic Oath, do not harm, in the pursuit of questionable medical experiments and personal egotistical goals in science. One of the most notorious names in this regard is that of the German doctor Josef Mengele. A young man of pleasant appearance with gallant manners and a charming smile, he received the nickname Angel of Death in Auschwitz and far beyond. Mengele was a doctor with sadistic inclinations, who derived true pleasure from observing the suffering of others. He conducted his horrifying experiments on living patients, adults and even small children, twins interested him the most. He used them for his gruesome experiments most often because they had identical genes, making it easier to compare their bodies and reactions to external stimuli. In Block 10, the doctor performed vivisections on living people, removed teeth from the unfortunate and attempted to grow new ones. He attempted to change eye colors through his experiments, performed castrations on young boys, and sterilized girls. Another important goal for Mengele was to provide Nazi hospitals and infirmaries with pure blood for treating soldiers. According to him, such blood was only found in children's bodies. Therefore, they drained every last drop of blood from still living children. In such situations, the groans and cries of the little patients drowned out all other sounds in the camp. The doctor conducted these procedures in the presence of his assistants. However, some of them left the room not wanting to witness the entire procedure with their own eyes. Overall, many were shocked by this man's cruelty, but everyone remained silent. After all, cruelty was not unusual at that time, and Josef Mengele, the Nazi executioner, went unpunished. He escaped to Brazil and spent the rest of his life there until 1979. However, even in concentration camps, there were no atrocities comparable to the ones that Japanese units became infamous for during World War II. Specifically, the Unit 731, led by Shiro Ishii. This Japanese doctor is responsible for dozens of horrifying medical experiments that claimed the lives of thousands of people. Unit 731 committed such monstrous crimes against men, women, and children that it's terrifying to even imagine. The victims were mostly Chinese prisoners. Unit 731 primarily presented itself as a secret organization focused on research and development of chemical weapons, masquerading as the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. However, in reality, it was neither an epidemic prevention unit nor a chemical weapons research center. Behind the bureaucratic haze, Unit 731 was established to legitimize intentional torture and murder of innocent people, supposedly for the sake of science and progress. Under Shiro Ishii's command, Unit 731 participated in a special project called Maruta. This Japanese word means logs, a euphemism for how the experiment subjects were mockingly referred to by their tormentors. The official cover for Unit 731 was that of a lumber mill, which is why researchers and guards referred to prisoners and victims as logs to keep the project secret, using phrases like "How many logs fell today?" to discuss their victims. Prisoners were infected with diseases through injections, limbs were amputated to study blood loss, people were locked in rooms with fans to better understand the effects of temperature and dehydration, and women were often raped to obtain infants for use in experiments. Many experiments were based on simulating real-life scenarios to help doctors understand how to treat injuries sustained by soldiers. For example, prisoners were subjected to frostbite, placed in centrifuges to study the effects of pressure, and more. Shiro Ishii was finally arrested by the United States during the occupation of Japan after World War II, but was never truly held accountable. He struck a deal with law enforcement: immunity in exchange for knowledge. And it worked. Ishii was never held responsible for any of his war crimes. He soon disappeared from public view for many years until his death in 1959. Indeed, sometimes true maniacs hide behind the facade of doctors. The victims usually belong to the most vulnerable segments of the population: children and elderly people. Kristen Gilbert was born on November 13, 1967, in Fall River, Massachusetts. She grew up in a fairly prosperous and peaceful atmosphere where there was no hint of domestic violence. Kristen's father and mother led a law-abiding lifestyle. Both parents were quite successful in their professions, which positively influenced the family's financial well-being. The girl was surrounded by love and care, and her parents tried to fulfill any whim of their daughter. This idyllic state continued until adolescence. During her teenage years, Kristen started exhibiting unhealthy tendencies towards manipulation and deception. She often talked about suicide if her demands and wishes weren't met. In her college years, she began threatening her classmates with physical harm. She was eventually expelled from college. However, this didn't prevent her from pursuing a career in medicine. A nursing home eagerly hired the young nurse. The management was impressed by her knowledge and skills, and her colleagues envied how Kristen was favored by the administration and beloved by patients. But something strange began happening with the latter. They often died, and it always coincided with Gilbert's shifts. Initially, this didn't raise suspicions. Of course, Kristen acquired the nickname Angel of Death in jest, but she still wasn't considered responsible for such an anomaly. However, horrifying details eventually came to light. During her 3 years of work, more than 300 people died on her shifts. While she never confessed to her motives for the killings, her colleagues suspect that romantic feelings were involved. The security officer had to be present when a patient's death was certified. Kristen could have drawn the attention of James Perrin. Then perhaps she derived pleasure from the killings and couldn't stop. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, which she continues to serve. Another serial maniac, Harold Shipman, took the lives of innocent people for 25 years. The story of this doctor, whom England refers to as Dr. Death, is still largely incomprehensible. Even today, many years after his death, no one can definitely say how many lives he was responsible for. Terrifying figures range from 250 to 500 victims. The story of the future maniac Harold Frederick Shipman began in a working-class family on January 14, 1946, the day he was born. The boy grew up as a sociable and intelligent child. He felt superior to his classmates in school. His parents were proud of their son's academic achievements. When Harold was 17, his mother died of cancer. It was then that he decided to become a doctor to help people fight illnesses. Medical school was easy for him, so he easily obtained the coveted education. Police believe that Shipman committed his first murder on January 7, 1984. He responded to a call from an elderly woman named Dorothy Tucker, who complained of joint pain. The kind doctor offered her a painkiller injection. The old lady agreed, and Shipman injected her with 30 milligrams of a banned substance. The pain immediately subsided, and the patient smiled gratefully at the doctor. He sat and closely observed as the elderly woman slowly and painlessly died. After her last breath, Shipman took a cheap souvenir from the table and left the house, only to return the next day to document the natural death. He often took trivial trinkets as keepsakes, and he always sent condolences to the relatives. But then these modest souvenirs weren't enough for him. Shipman decided that, among other things, he could forge the wills of the deceased. That's how he was discovered. British society found it hard to believe that such an honorable and gallant young man could be a cold-blooded killer, and thus the case remained unsolved for a long time. However, further investigations revealed that all of Shipman's victims had been killed in the same manner, by overdosing on banned substances, making it difficult for him to deny his involvement. On January 31, 2000, a jury in Preston court found Shipman guilty of killing 15 patients and forging wills. He was sentenced to 15 life terms. The story of Lucia de Berk, a resident of the Netherlands, deserves a special attention. Unlike the previous maniac, this woman was arrested immediately after the death of an innocent person. An ordinary nurse at a clinic in The Hague was taken into custody in 2001 following the mysterious death of baby Juliana. The institution's staff and administration had no doubt that it was Lucia who influenced the outcome of the baby's treatment. Moreover, they accused her of 3 more cases of death involving young patients and 3 attempted murders. While they believed these incidents to be due to medical negligence, this couldn't absolve the suspect of guilt. According to court documents, the nurse, without suspecting it herself, administered lethal doses of digoxin to patients. The case gained widespread publicity, and in the Netherlands, de Berk was considered one of the most terrifying serial killers. However, the case took an unusual turn. A number of doctors and researchers spoke in defense of the woman. 6 years later, in 2008, the court agreed to review her case as doubts arose about the cause of death of one of de Berk's patients. It was established that some of Lucia's patients had died of natural causes, and therefore their caregiver could not be held responsible for their deaths. Thus, the woman was set free, and now Lucia de Berk has been free since April 2008. All these stories remind us that even behind the noble facade of a doctor, a person's dark sides can be hidden. Of course, one should trust professionals. After all, they've spent half their lives studying biology and chemistry. But a bit of attentiveness and critical thinking wouldn't hurt either. Thank you for watching.